Hello, everyone. Today we're joined by Jeff Younger, fearless father, good friend of mine. Has always had my back since the very beginning. And Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Harrison. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, I'm stoked. So I want to ask you first, before anything, just about your life growing up and how you became the man you are today. What was like growing up for you?
Man, I grew up in a divorced home. My parents got divorced when right before my eighth birthday, and uh, I didn't really understand what was going on. And for years I would sit out on the curb and wait for my dad to show up. For years I did this.
Wow.
My mom
How
eventually
old were you?
moved us. Yeah, what's that?
How old were you?
Eight,
I'm just
eight,
curious.
8. Yeah. My mother moved us to a very rural part of Texas to be near her sister. My nearest neighbor was about 5 miles away. And I literally had to go 6 miles to get to an asphalt road just to get to school. And so I grew up pretty much by myself. I went to school, hung out with my friends, then I'd come home, and my mom wouldn't come home until 9 or 10 at night every day from work. And so we grew up very poor. I mean, I went months just eating bread and ketchup. I mean, we were very poor. So as I got older, I began to hunt, and I'd hunt rabbits. Before I was old enough to have a rifle, I would use an Apache throwing stick, and I'd catch rabbits. And I'd bring food home for the family, and I did some trapping, bird trapping, and things. Um, and I began to have a relationship with nature from that. And the county would offer $45 for every coyote that you brought in. So I made money for the family by bringing in coyotes. I only had a 17 caliber rifle, so I had to be close and accurate on the first shot. And I learned how to track, and I learned how to counter track because coyotes they do counter tracking. So I learned from coyotes how to evade trackers, and kind of just grew up on my own. My dad had left all of his college books, and so I was reading college books when I was like 9 years old. That's all I had, and I read a lot of British literature, a lot of European history, um, a lot of mathematics. By the time I got into high school, I was already doing differential equations, and so I was kind of educating myself in a way. Um, at the age of 14, my mom threw me out of the house because of my stepdad. We had conflicts with my stepdad, and so I left the home on Christmas Eve with about 2 feet of snow on the ground. I left home around midnight and went down to Houston and didn't like it much on my own because it was hard to, you can't get a job at that age. So at 15 years old, I forged my birth certificate and joined the Marine Corps illegally.
Oh, wow.
And
Where were you
I
sleeping, by the
spent
way?
I spent 2 years, and I spent a lot of time homeless. And eventually, what I did is I stole a utility bill out of a street that I had walked by all the time and registered myself into high school. And with that utility bill as my address in district, right? And I went to a high school that was unfortunately located exactly on the boundary between the third and the fifth wards in Houston. The third ward is the Latino gangs, the fifth ward are the black gangs, so it was a battleground school. So I went in the Marine Corps for almost 2 years before they caught me. That was back when they released the nuclear tipped tomahawks, and I went through a TS1 security clearance, and it was my dentist who gave me up. They called my childhood dentist, and he gave me up. He said, you got it the wrong kid. He's too young. He can't be in the Marine Corps." So they threw me out and told me to come back when I was 21 and go through officer school. And I went back to Houston, finished high school. And what I had developed while I was in the service was some programming skills. And I taught myself C programming and built the first testing system for digital phone circuits in the United States.
Wow.
We used AI techniques from the 1960s to do that. So it was way beyond what had been done before. And we could, it's still, actually they can't replace it. It's running on IBM System 88s right now, and they cannot replace the software. It's just not profitable for them to do so. So that's kind of how I got into my professional world. And then I got notice that, I was going to lose my Marine Corps education benefits. So I had been living in Hong Kong. I had a business in Hong Kong. I had a business in the UK and in Hong Kong. And my dad had 2 heart attacks, so that's how I got to Dallas. And I took care of him until he died. And but during that time, I got this letter that I was going to lose like $80,000 in education benefits because they were going to expire. So I didn't go to college till I was like 35. And since I didn't have to do it for money or do it for a job, I just took whatever I wanted. So I studied philosophy, mathematics, and linguistics. And I had a good time in college and learned a lot. I've been able to apply a lot of that, actually. And then, eventually I got married. I found a woman that I felt I could trust. I was in my 40s. She was in her 40s. She was a pediatrician. We got married. We had children. 2 years into the marriage, 2 years after the boys were born, she divorced me and tried to turn one of my boys into a girl, and has in fact chemically castrated him now at this point.
It's tragic, man. It just breaks my heart to hear that. I guess
So my boys,
gotta ask.
unfortunately, are going through a broken home like I went through, which is exactly what I wanted to spare them from.
Right, that's what I was gonna
This
say.
woman
Is
is
I
absolutely
imagine it was
intent on
like,
keeping me out of their lives. Like she would do anything to keep me out of their lives. She'll lie, cheat, and steal to keep me out.
it's horrible. I was just curious because so you basically didn't see your dad for like most of your childhood.
That's right.
What was that like? And I was gonna say pretty much what you said, which is I would imagine that would inspire like, wow, I'm not gonna let that happen to my kids ever. And
Yeah,
how'd you
man. I
get
mean,
back in with
I
them?
didn't really know how bad I had experienced a loss until I got in the Marine Corps. And I call the Marine Corps my patria nostra. Marine Corps is my father, and the Marine Corps taught me all the things my dad would have taught me. It taught me responsibility, a bottom line attitude toward performance, no excuses. The idea that unity of action is more important than being right all the time, and honor, courage, and commitment. And my father would have taught me all that, but I didn't get that until much later in my life. And so I had to build those habits really in my 20s, when I would have had those habits in my early teens. And just think how much further I probably would have gone from that. I'll tell you this, had I not gone into the Marine Corps and developed a self-control, I'm pretty sure I'd have been in prison.
Well, it's wonderful that you got in. You were able to forge it. I kind of love that story, actually. Okay, the kids are 2. You guys are still married, or what? How did she
Yeah,
all
we're
of a
still
sudden
married, yeah.
want to make one of your boys a girl, even though that's not something she can do, obviously?
There were some things happening behind the scenes. I had 2 stepdaughters, and one of the big red flags that happened about maybe 18 months into the marriage, about 6 months before the boys were born. So she told me that both of these girls were adopted, right? One of them was adopted from her brother, who was a 3-time convicted felon in California, looking at life in prison on the next felony conviction. And he had abused the poor girl and had exposed her to methamphetamines in the womb and so forth. So she was born addicted. So I didn't know that. Then her other daughter was from a sperm donor and wasn't adopted. So had I known that, I would have definitely not married her. But that's where the real conflict, I think, happened. As teenage girls start growing a little bit older and they start developing a sense of independence, one of the problems was that my ex-wife abandoned her daughters to me. So she spent 80, 90 hours a week at work. And so I had to take her girls to school. I'm the one who got their homework done. I'm the one who took them clothes shopping. At the same time, I'm having to take care of these two twin boys.
Wow.
So I was running a business out of the house. I was the stay-at-home dad for everybody. You know what I mean? So the conflicts began to arise, value conflicts really, where, one of the daughters, the daughter from a sperm donor, was just a hardcore left winger, and just couldn't stand my right wing ideology, my right wing approach to the world. And one thing in particular is, we don't dress immodestly in my family. Men don't dress immodestly and women don't dress immodestly. And so she took great umbrage with that. And eventually, my ex-wife basically just sided with her daughter. And I think that what she did to my son was really just a mechanism to remove all the children from me, just to get rid of me. I mean, that's really what it was. I'm not even sure she even thinks my son's transgender. I think she's just using it as a means to take the boys away from me. At one point, she told me, your line ends here. Like, she wants to extinguish the genetic line of my family. And that's, like, basically her goal.
It's a horrible thing. It's just, how could you leave something like that out when you marry a person and not tell them that? And also, I think it's really admirable, that you took care of the daughters. Do you ever get to talk to the daughters? I'm just kind of curious.
No, I mean, look, you know how it is in California, man. I don't want any contact with any of them because just the slightest little thing can be construed as domestic violence. And so there's just no safe way for me to be in contact with anybody. I can't contact my sons or my ex-wife. There's just no way to do that.
It's just a tragedy. I really hope we can do something to fix the family courts.
It's the thing that I think is, look, there's crazy people in the world. Okay. There's crazy people in the world that do these things to other people and are willing to do these things to children. Okay. That's not surprising. That's probably been true through all of human history. We've had crazy bad people. That's true. What I think is unusual is that somehow our courts have usurped our rights to the point where I don't have any rights to stop it. And, I really think we've just reached a point where the courts are so corrupt and so willing to harm children that we just have to be honest with young men and tell them that you can't marry under these laws. It's just too risky.
Yeah, it is risky these days, and it's just such a scary thought. You hear about these stories, like what happened to you, and I'm curious too. Like, give us more details about what happened in court, because if I remember correctly, you had half custody even, and got an order from I don't remember, the Supreme Court, or top in Texas, for her to not move away. But then California's state sanctioned kidnapping laws for transgender insanity played a role in all this, and
yeah, man. So there's basically what you find out is that court rulings and orders don't mean anything. That lawyers that are bribing judges can pretty much always get the outcomes that they want. And just to preface this a little bit, I had a lot of people call and ask me, do you know any great lawyers in California? Know any good lawyers in Texas? And divorce lawyers. And I tell them, you don't need to know. All you need to do is you go and look at the campaign finance reports for these judges, find the lawyer that donated the most money to the judge, and that's who you hire.
So these lawyers openly, and you can find it yourself, donate to the judges that they then present cases for.
Yeah. During the period when they took my rights away in Texas, the law firm representing my ex-wife was a platinum sponsor for the judge and had given her $30,000. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
How is that not a conflict of interest or something?
In every state, it's legal. Political contributions are not considered a basis to recuse in every state. So what happened to me was we went to the normal divorce route, which took 3 years.
It's a long time.
We had a custody evaluator. His name is Blake Mitchell. He works out of Frisco, Texas. I name names, right? Blake Mitchell works out of Frisco, Texas. I showed him that video that's on YouTube, Mommy Says I'm a Girl, which is my son saying, my mom is telling me that I'm a girl and I believe her, right? At 3 years old. I showed him that video. That video nowhere appears in his custody report, never mentioned it. And he actually told the court that I had made a false accusation against my wife because she was not trying to transition my son. And since I had made a false accusation that she was, they gave me less than standard possession time with my boys. Of course, now we know she was absolutely trying to transition the boy. And this psychologist, Blake Mitchell, just straight up lied to the court. And this execrable liar, Blake Mitchell in Frisco, Texas, is still practicing. He still gets tons of business from the courts. The courts order people to go to him. He's still doing this because he's probably also bribing judges, frankly. So that was the first thing. That was my first introduction to the court corruption. I remember asking my own expert witness, I said, what do people do when they lose their kids through this kind of corrupt process? She says, you know what men do? They shut the fuck up and pay their child support.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that about sums up what I've experienced in the family courts. Immediately she ramped up the transitioning, and the school began to help her transition my son. So they were transitioning my son secretly behind my back, first, second, third grade.
In Texas. I just want to make sure everyone knows that.
And it was at Pinkerton Middle School in Coppell, Texas. And it was the Coppell School Board that spearheaded all this. And the principal's name is Christy Mickelson, was her name. They've since closed that school down, probably because of all the notoriety that I brought to it. What parent would ever want to send their child to Pinkerton Middle School, where the school board in Coppell, Texas, and the principal, Miss Mickelson, allowed child abuse and abetted child abuse in the school itself. Everything happened there behind my back. Eventually I caught on. My ex-wife made a CPS report against me. The CPS used all its dirty tricks. You know, they called me and hung up immediately when I answered the phone, and said that I didn't answer the phone. And then she was literally standing outside my son's school, and then she walked in and strip searched my son. She made my son get naked in front of her so she could look at him.
How is that?
So my son's enduring all this crazy shit. And I filed grievances against the school district, but it's virtually impossible to sue school districts. Although finally I've gotten a law passed here in Texas. It's the second law I've worked on, that now parents can sue school districts for abuse of their children, and the schools don't have immunity for that. So we can, but before you couldn't sue, they had sovereign immunity. So that happens. She starts ramping it up, presenting him to the world as a girl and so forth. And then she filed in court again to get sole control of the boys. So we had another trial in 2019. And at that trial, the top experts in transgender medicine showed up at this little courthouse in Dallas, Texas. I had Dr. Levine, who started the first transgender clinic in America in the 1970s. And they closed that clinic after 4 years because their data showed they were harming patients. So they've known since the 1970s that these procedures not only don't work, they hurt patients. She brought in Johanna Olsen Kennedy, a truly awful person. And they didn't put her on the stand because when I deposed her, I asked her one question that completely took her off the witness list. I said, Dr. Olsen Kennedy, what is your medical justification for the removal of healthy body parts from children? And I'm not making this up, man. This is in the transcript of the deposition, sworn transcript. She said, if the body parts cause psychological distress, they're not healthy, so we can remove them. If you don't like something about your body,
insane.
They can cut it off. So the lawyer sitting next to me, opposing counsel, dropped her pen left the room, and they just didn't put her on the stand. So I won that trial. I got 50-50 custody, no child support. But I had to go through some counseling on 9 items. These were things like, recognizing the signs of bullying, unconditionally loving your children, all the typical stuff, right? So they handed over to this crazy bitch named Linda Threets, Dr. Linda Threets. She practices out of Dallas, Texas. Dr. Threets decides that I'm going to have to pay 3 counselors instead of just 1. She brings in a Dr. Susan Fletcher, who practices out of Frisco, Texas, who will figure prominently in this story in a little bit. And then she tries to bring in a lawyer to act as a lawyer somehow, like she was just appointing lawyers. So I just had to get my lawyer involved. So I wound up paying for 2 counselors. She wanted to milk me for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she refused to cover any of the 9 elements in the court order.
And these doctors and the custody evaluation,
50-50 custody. Yeah.
All you paid for the evaluation, and these new doctors, not the mom at all?
I paid her probably $30,000. And she never covered not 1 item that the court ordered her to cover, so that I could never get 50-50 custody. And eventually, she starts working overtly with opposing counsel behind the scenes. And this was all set up by an amicus attorney who basically rammed her through as the counselor. So Dr. Susan Fletcher is the one who's seeing my children, and Dr. Susan Fletcher refused to let me bring the children to her. She would only see my kids if my ex-wife brought the children to her, and the reason for that is very simple. She wanted to always say that James always appeared as a girl to her. She wanted to be able to say that. So she wouldn't, because this is another thing about my case. When James is with me, he's just a normal boy. Didn't present as a girl at all. Talented boxer, talented wrestler, just a normal boy. Eventually I reach a point where I basically forced her to allow my son to go. I bring my son on the second session, and my son says he wants to be a boy and he's embarrassed being a girl. And he said, I want to record you on my Apple Watch because I keep telling you and you're not listening to me. She threw my son out of the office and initiated the 7th CPS investigation against me. She said I was forcing my son to say he wanted to be a boy. Then she refused to give me her records, which is illegal in Texas. Nevertheless, the judge sustained it. How did that happen? Dr. Susan Fletcher is highly connected with the governor of Texas and is connected with the liberals in the Texas House that run our Texas House. She was actually appointed to the Red Flag Commission by the governor of Texas to enact gun control. So she has connections with these people. So we got this high-powered lawyer flying up from Austin. It probably cost $50,000 for this lawyer to appear. She's one of the attorneys that represents the governor on issues. I mean, very high-powered attorney. And she just got the judge to violate the law and not give me the records that I was entitled to. So I've never seen the records for my son. I've never been able to go into court and say, see, my son said he wants to be a boy, because they denied me the records. Incredible. So then what they did is they put me under supervised visitation because they said I wasn't going to the counseling the way they ordered it. So I get supervised visitation, and she sends me to Forensic Counseling Services in Dallas, Texas, and it's run by 2 faggots. And they're very pro-trans, and they would not let me change my son out of address. They would not let me pray with my son. They wouldn't let me use my son's real name. And so I just wouldn't go. I just wouldn't go and do that, And that's when I realized what supervised visitation really is. It's just an infinitely malleable collection of evidence for a psychologist to say that you're being abusive. It's just a supervised visitation is a setup, and I don't think any father should ever attend supervised counseling. So anyway, I don't go. So they said, well, you're not attending counseling, so you've abandoned your kids. So this is a pattern that they do in family court. They create conditions that you can't satisfy something, and then they say you disobeyed it. I'm going to create the conditions where you can't attend supervised visitation, and then I'm going to say you abandon your kids. So that's when she said, well, since you've abandoned your children, I'm going to allow your ex-wife to move to California. That's what the judge, this is Judge Mary Brown, 301st District Court in Dallas, Texas. I call her Judge Bloody Mary Brown. Totally corrupt. I'm sure she's bribed. So anyway, so she gives her permission to move to California. So I go up on an emergency mandamus to the Texas Supreme Court, arguing that my sons would lose the protections of Texas law in California because of the transgender kidnapping bill in California. But the justice, his name is Blacklock, Justice Blacklock, I call him Black-Hearted Blacklock, and Justice Young wrote the opinion and said, no, she can move to California. He's no more likely to be chemically castrated in California than in Texas, where it was illegal. That's how stupid these people are.
It doesn't even make sense.
So about a year after he wrote that opinion, the governor of Texas promoted him to Chief Justice of the court. So you're starting to see a pattern here where what I was really fighting was the governor of the state of Texas, who's being funded by Paul Singer, who's the largest donor to the Republican Party, and started the child transgender movement. It was a Republican that started the child transgender movement, not a Democrat.
Wow.
And he's the largest out-of-state donor to Texas, and he gives a lot of money to the governor. So that's who I was really fighting, Soros and Paul Singer. So, and it all made sense when I realized that, right? I'm like, how is my ex-wife able to have all this political power for this crazy left-wing stuff? So then I get to California. California has a strange system where you get 3 judges. You get a home court judge, a trial court judge, and a supervising judge. We go before the home court judge. She's all in favor of me seeing my kids. She doesn't understand why I can't see my kids. There's no conviction. There's no allegation of abuse. No nothing. Opposing counsel sends a text right there in the courtroom. The judge gets a text about a minute later. She calls a recess. She comes back in 30 minutes and without saying a single word says, you're not going to be able to see your children, and the case is sealed. So they illegally sealed my case. You can't seal cases in California. You have open records. You have open records laws which prohibit that. So after that weird thing happened, we went to the supervising judge to talk about this, and the supervising judge said, "Well, we're going to unseal these records." And then the clerk said, "Well, we can't unseal them. They deleted them. They actually deleted all the records in my case. Even my lawyers could not access them." And my lawyers from that time until I went to trial were never able to access the records. I still don't have access to my records. Okay, so, and then that's all strange. Then they get rid of the supervising judge and the home court judge and collapse it all into one judge, the trial court judge. So there's no way for me to appeal because it's all one judge now. And that judge was Mark Uhas, who really needs to be removed from office. He's what he did to me, he's done to a number of fathers. You know, our good friend Adam Vina, for example, had him as a judge. Judge Uhas denied me an independent medical exam. He denied me an independent psychological exam. He denied me equalization of attorney's fees, which is a mandatory in California. And eventually I had to go to court without a lawyer because he didn't equalize the fees.
Doesn't the judge have to give you the reasons when he chooses those to be denied?
He's constantly said the paperwork wasn't filed correctly, and he couldn't consider it because it was filed incorrectly. So in one case, there was information in one box, it was supposed to be in another. In another case, it was because it was filed on 2 sheets instead of 1 sheet. Then I did it on 2 sheets, and then he said, no, it has to be on 1 sheet. So it was very clear he was just simply not going to accept any filings. So I go to trial with no evidence. I was required to provide discovery to the other side. The judge ruled that they didn't have to give me discovery. So I went to trial with no evidence from the other side. Yeah, none whatsoever. So anyway, we go to trial. I bring in Dr. Miriam Grossman, who just destroyed the opposing counsel and the other expert witness. Their expert witness was AJ. I can't remember her last name. She works at Children's Hospital. It's basically, a woman who thinks she's a man, just an ugly woman who thinks she's a man. And I destroyed her on the stand. The judge actually said this is becoming emotionally abusive. I mean, she just was not able to answer basic questions of logic. Then Miriam Grossman destroyed them. Then I proved that my ex-wife and Children's Hospital had fabricated a false medical history for my son. So, for example, I told you that my son did not present consistently as a girl, that with me he presented as a boy. Even at his mom's house, he presented as a boy, because when I would go and pick him up, he would come out of her house in boys' clothes, and I showed video of that. So he was comfortable as a boy with her too. None of that's in the medical history with Children's Hospital. They fabricated a fake medical history to chemically castrate this boy. So the judge didn't find any of this persuasive. He said that not only do I have supervised visitation, but even my phone calls have to be supervised now. So $300 a phone call. Yep. And when I send gifts, birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, or I send letters, my ex-wife is not obligated to give them to the boys. So I just quit sending them letters or anything. What I do now is communicate with them online. They're old enough to get on the internet. They can find me. So I'm going to start up a little podcast of my own, Harrison, but not for any reason other than just to communicate with my boys.
I think that's an incredible idea. Do you have a transcript from the last trial, the Miriam Grossman one?
No, they sealed the transcripts, and the court reporters refused to give me any of those. I can't get any court reporter to do it. They tell me I need to get a court order to get the transcripts, and the judge refuses to give me an order. Yeah,
I don't think you need an order for that normally in California.
I know. So that's going on. And then they also illegally sealed the trial. They wouldn't even allow press in. That's illegal. The press wasn't even allowed into the trial. We had press people filing to come to the trial, and they were told you can't come in, which is totally illegal. So basically, I mean, what they've done to Trump, they do in family court every day. It's just a completely corrupt system that's driven largely by ideological criteria. It has nothing to do with what's good for the kids. And there's no hope once you're in the system. Like for most men, there's no hope. You can cross your fingers. Like, we look to you for inspiration, right? Because like you were able to get your kids, it's very rare. And we're so happy for you, man. Like we actually threw a party here in Texas. We all went out and had a beer about it. Like at least we get a win sometimes. It does happen sometimes. But the most important thing that we can tell young men is don't get in the system. And there's exactly two ways you can have children without getting in this system. One way is to adopt, and the other way is to use a surrogate. And I think men should avail themselves of those pathways and not get into this system.
It's just heartbreaking that it's happening so often. I mean, something came to mind. And first of all, thank you for always supporting me and Sawyer, and never take it for granted. I think about you and Adam and these other people every day. If I get annoyed or anything, I'm like, no, what the F would getting emotional Jeff or Adam do just to be with their son like I get to be right now? I don't get to be annoyed. I have to be thankful for every second with Sawyer.
Right on, brother.
So man, it doesn't escape me at all. And I remember I was in court. There was this dad, just waiting for my hearing one time. Yeah. Guy, like Indian American guy, is like it sounded super crazy. Hadn't seen the kid in a few weeks, and then you find out why, and it was like he said a bad word to his kid because his kid was doing something inappropriate at the age of 13, and for him saying the F word or something, he hadn't seen his kid in weeks, and the judge would graciously granted him like a weekend visit. And I just remember being like, wow. And I'm sitting there, and then when my court hearing goes, everyone's like astounded because the mom had done so many crazy things and violated the order so much, and they didn't change custody at all. And it was like you could see it on everyone's face, like, whoa, how is this one even real? I just don't understand.
Yeah, these judges are terrible, man, and you know, we really have to put it at the foot of the judges. The judges are the ones doing this stuff, and you know, the way to easily see how messed up this is look at all the vetting. Like I have to go through. You know, I added up one time how much money I've spent on psychological evaluations. And I've spent over $280,000 on psychological evaluations, $280,000 over the period of this litigation, 11 years. You know, I go through all of this scrutiny, just every, I'm under discovery, right? So every single credit card transaction is scrutinized by a forensic accountant, by opposing counsel. All my cash withdrawals I have to account for, all this stuff. I don't have any privacy. All this scrutiny I'm under, but you know,
why?
Step parents,
child support, or why?
No,
why
because she keeps suing me, which puts me back under discovery.
Okay.
So, you know, but what scrutiny does a step parent have to go through? None. Step parents don't have any scrutiny. They don't get any psychological evaluations. So it's weird that like your own child, you're highly scrutinized, but step parents get no scrutiny, and almost all child abuse is by step parents.
That is interesting.
So it's completely backwards, and I think it's being done on purpose. You know, there's no way it could be this bad and not be on purpose. But fundamentally, basically, if you meet a judge, especially a family court judge, you're meeting a scoundrel. You're meeting an evil person who doesn't deserve Christian or human charity from you at all. They're evil, wicked people.
What do you think motivates them?
You know, one of the things I learned years ago reading Nietzsche, you know, most people ask things like, why did this guy do this? You know, they ask that kind of question. Nietzsche didn't ask that question. He said, what kind of person would want to do this? That's a very different thing. What kind of person would want to be a family court judge? Think about that. First of all, they're probably very bad lawyers because they can make a lot more money instead of being a judge, right? So they're probably not very good lawyers, and they don't think that they can do well as a lawyer. That's first thing. The second thing is they'd be attracted to family law is if they feel like they know better how to raise kids than other people, and they're the kind of person that wants to tell other people how to raise their kids. And when you select for that kind of person, you're going to get bad outcomes. Now, the way that's supposed to be controlled in our society is we're supposed to have rights when we go into court. And courts are limited in what they can do to us or do to our children. But in practice, because family courts have really almost no appellate pathway.
It's not a real court.
It's not a real court. And
There's no innocent until proven guilty. It's the opposite.
That's right. Yeah. They do anything they want, and they're never held accountable for it. And you can't get into federal court out of family court. The federal court has an official policy to not accept cases from family court. It's called the domestic relations exception. Your audience can Google that. And so they know that there is no oversight over what they do, so they just do whatever they want. And whenever you give a government person control over your life with no oversight, you're just going to have these outcomes.
It's just terrible. I mean, my experience in it was just constant disbelief of everything happening.
Yeah, it's not American. It's totally anti-American in every way.
Yeah. It is. It's a complete travesty of the justice system. And just, everyone's just guilty until proven innocent.
They are.
You just see the most false accusations with no accountability. It's just like accepted that it's normal for people to make
Yes.
stuff up against the other parent or person in a divorce. And it's just like, how is that
There's
okay?
no penalty for that kind of stuff, you know,
There should
and it
be.
just happens all the time. And California is really bad because, you know, California, the only requirement to prove abuse is emotional distress. You know, I have a friend of
I
mine
mean,
who
took a lot more for me to
his
prove it.
court filings caused emotional distress, and the court found that he had engaged in domestic violence because of his court filings.
But the kid's not reading the court filings, right, Your Honor?
That's insane. It's insane.
It's totally insane.
That's why in California, it's really, honestly, California, it's not safe to have kids in California, man. It's just not safe. You know, the domestic violence laws are crazy there.
And the schools might try to, you know, teach your kids weird stuff and who knows what, all sorts of.
That's right. Yeah, it's going on all the time.
They've got LGBT counselors in all the schools now. I think specifically for the trans stuff, not even.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they said so. They've been open about it. You know, I've often said the only transgender surgery that I would ever support is to amputate Senator Weiner from the Senate of California. Senator
He's a weird
Weiner
one.
is the epicenter of all the evil that's coming out of the California legislature. And that guy needs to be amputated from the Senate. Somebody needs to
That'd be
do
great.
a Weinerectomy on the Senate.
I would love to see someone replace him. I actually think he doesn't represent the people of San Francisco, even though San Francisco's
Right.
pretty crazy. They're not like that. You meet normal everyday people, they think this transgender kids is insane. Guys in sports is
Yeah,
insane.
actually, everybody pretty much
They
believes
don't.
that. There's like just very few
I know,
activists that think the other way.
I haven't met anyone.
Yeah, yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling like a big, finally, like this momentum and pushback against the transgender craze, I'll call it. And I'm stoked to see that. It's cool to see Trump's executive orders, but I'm wondering how we're going to actually end it. And if you have any ideas of how we could do that.
Well, I mean, it's going to happen by laws and by lawsuits if you want to do it peacefully. So you need to California needs laws, and people need to find some way in the California law to sue these people and to get an action against them, especially if you can get a civil lawsuit against them in federal court. But let me tell you, federal courts don't want these lawsuits. They're doing everything they can to dismiss them. They don't want them. So the federal judges are not your friend there. But I've often said that in my view, in the end, this is the issue that is going to cause massive civil unrest in the United States. Because people are simply not going to let this happen to kids very much longer. And eventually we'll lose Trump. Okay, we'll lose Trump. He won't be there. And they'll go right back to this stuff. They'll double down on this stuff. So ultimately, I think, and it's an issue that really cuts through left, right. It cuts through Democrat, Republican. It really exposes the complete and total decadence of American society. And I don't mean decadence in the sense of immoral or acting depraved. That's kind of the modern sense of that word. But decadence comes from the Latin word decadenced, which means out of step. And so we're not in step with one another. We're living such different ways of life, and we have such different attitudes towards life, and even what the definition of life is, that we're probably not able to live together anymore. And so either we could go back to radical federalism, where we would just we would recognize that California is going to trans kids, and places like Texas, you're going to get the death penalty for it. We're going to give you the needle, and we don't have to live the same way. We could do that. But this isn't an issue that most people can do that on. Most people consider this child abuse, and they're not going to let California become an empire of child abuse. Right. So,
and they shouldn't.
I don't see any peaceful way forward on this. I think it will eventually cause massive civil unrest. And the people in the government should take notice of this. They should listen to what I'm saying here. Because there's no other issue on the table that will bring violence against people in the government the way this issue will do it.
Right, because we're talking about harming children, sterilizing them, scarring them for life. It's just the most horrible thing I think we've done as a society. And I just don't understand how it continues to go on. Like, lawsuits, great. I'm seeing some detransitioners get some good lawsuits in. That's about it. There's no suing family court. There's no suing. The statute of limitations is super short for lawsuits. I mean, there's so many things protecting them.
Yeah.
I'd love to open that up, but I think that ideally, if somehow Congress, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, tried to pass a bill to protect children's innocence, obviously it'd be hard to get some Democrats to jump vote on that, because I think that's a 2/3 vote one, if I recall correctly. But let's just say miraculously it did someday. You know, okay, now it's illegal. Do the people that have done this, if we're acknowledging that it's child abuse to children, do they get held accountable criminally, financially? How does that look?
So I think eventually the way that the government will try to let off the steam from this so that it doesn't become civil unrest is there'll be some just massive lawsuits, and there'll be massive payouts from it. That's one thing. The second thing I think that they'll do, and these are called limited hands. The government creates kind of a valve opening where you can let steam off to keep things from heating up too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they'll probably give detransitioners care. They'll give them free care, that kind of thing. And they'll try to get that to assuage people. I just don't think that that's going to assuage people. I don't think that the average person is comfortable sitting still while this happens to kids. And I really think that the government's in a quandary. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to back out of this. Because if it admits that, the largest and most trusted medical institutions in America sexually abuse children on an industrial scale, there'll be violence. And they don't really know how to back out of it. I think it's very problematic for them. And I'm the only one who ever talks about this. Everybody else talks about, political solutions, all this stuff. But I don't actually believe that the United States is under democratic control. Like, I don't think voting much matters.
I think a lot of people feel that way, actually.
Yeah. I mean, if voting mattered, then, we would have had change under Reagan. And nothing happened under Reagan that changed anything. Nothing happened under the Bushes. It's just there's an unelected bureaucracy in the agencies that actually run the country. And I think they know, and I've talked to people at both the federal and state levels in these agencies. They know they went too far with this child transgender thing. They just don't know how to back away from it. They haven't figured out how to do that. And I don't think they're going to be able to figure it out. So I don't think democratic politics or laws are going to get you where you need to go. If I had to look for, a political way, you're asking me for a political way that it gets solved.
Yeah, ideally.
It would look a lot like President Trump sending the Marines into Children's Hospital in California and arresting these people at gunpoint and charging them with federal crimes, and it doesn't really matter what federal crimes, as long as they go to a supermax facility in Colorado or Florida. It doesn't really matter. They're just going to shit into a concrete toilet for the rest of their lives and make an example of these people so that people don't get the idea that they can do this again. Because this isn't the first. This is another thing. This is not the first craze in psychology, okay? They were doing lobotomies on women in the 1960s. People forget that in the 1970s and 80s, they were doing doing brain-damaging electroshock treatments on young black boys because they were too aggressive or too obstreperous at school. They would literally brain damage them. Then you had in the
Same.
90s, remember you had the satanic cult scares with repressed memory that psychologists just made all this shit up. And all these innocent people went to prison on the testimony of these psychologists. And then all these children came out, 15 years later saying, actually, we all made it up. And we were told to say
Really?
this by psychologists. The psychology and the medical community have colluded to do some of the absolute worst things to our citizens. And so this is nothing new. Nothing ever happened to those people that did lobotomies to women, that brain damaged little black boys for being, spirited, that lied and got innocent people sent to prison. Nothing ever happens to these people. Nothing's ever happened to the Epstein people on the Epstein list that we know was child trafficking going on. So we have Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for child trafficking, but child trafficking to whom? There's no people. We don't have the rest of the people that she child trafficked the children to, even though we know they have the list and know who it was, right? So nobody will be held accountable within the system. And that's the thing that I think a lot of activists, whether you're feminist or anti-feminist or however you come at this, are in denial about that. There is no reforming the system in the system. You have to step outside the system to reform it. Trump could do that if he went outside the system and just manufactured crimes against these people and just put them in supermax prisons. I don't think that's likely to happen. I don't think he can get the Department of Justice to do that.
Yeah, there's been so many horrible things they've done in the past. There's the Tuskegee experiments. They gave pregnant chicks cigarettes. They gave pregnant chicks, I don't remember the name of the chemical, but
Thorazine.
some like
Thorazine.
Yeah, it was just crazy stuff over the years.
Massive
but I think
birth effects from it.
Yeah, the birth effects. But I think that what they're doing now, as terrible as all those things are, since it's happening to young children, is even worse.
It's even worse, and it's the sexual mutilation of children, which is the thing that people are simply not willing to stand for. And so I don't really see a happy political solution. If the Department of Justice would do its damn job, if Pam Bondi and Kash Patel would get their act together and send hostage rescue team men with AR-15s, M4s, grenades and tear gas into Children's Hospital and take these people out blindfolded and handcuffed and render them to Gitmo, we could stop it. People would accept that it was going to get fixed. But that's not going to happen, and so I don't think people are going to accept that it's going to get fixed.
I mean, I'd like to see people be thrown in prison for sure over this. I think it's just the worst evil of our time.
No, there's absolutely no question about that. Yeah. And frankly, judges of whatever stripe, but mainly family court judges, just should not be welcome in polite society. They should not be if you're a restaurant owner, you shouldn't allow family court judges to eat in your place. I mean, these are sexual abusers. These are child sex abusers. They traffic in children and they destroy the lives of children. You shouldn't allow them in your business. You shouldn't allow them in your professional clubs. You shouldn't allow them in your golf clubs. These people should be pariahs in our society. And we need to start treating people like that. I mean, shunning people is a very powerful signal to get people to change. So that's another problem. Our rich people, the rich people that are on our side, don't do that. They don't do that. On the other side, if there were some racists, they would shun them. Like the left, rich left people would shun somebody who was accused of racism. But our guys won't shun anybody, even though they're sexually mutilating kids in their court. They'll sit down and have dinner with them politely, like it's just normal.
What do you think that difference is between the powerful right and left?
There's a really good book on this by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. And he did fantastic research on the moral differences between left and right. And one of the big differences is that leftists only use 3 criteria for making moral decisions. People on the right use the same 3 criteria, but they add 2 more. That's why people on the right can understand people on the left, but people on the left cannot understand people on the right. One of the criteria that the right uses that's very important is order. And they highly value social order and conformity. And the reason for that is very simple. People on the right understand what happens when you lose social order. You know, it looks like the Congo. It looks like South Africa right now. The consequences are terrible, right? And so people on the right are willing to make all kinds of compromises in order to maintain social order. And the left weaponizes that against the right and says, if you'll only compromise with me on this child transgender issue, we won't have violence. We won't have Antifa surrounding pregnant women like they just did in Washington State, right? Surrounding a pregnant woman who just wants to go to church, right? So they say, why don't you just compromise with us and we can maintain social order? And they keep doing that, and we keep compromising with them. And so we've given the country away to them because of this. So a lot of it is because we don't want to be confrontational like Antifa. So what I've called for is a right-wing Antifa. We need to confront people at all levels. They need to be confronted in the boardroom. They need to be confronted in middle management. They need to be confronted on the street. They need to be confronted in the courts. They need to be confronted in the agencies. It should be nonstop confrontation from the right. And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that because our people so value social order that they're willing to put up with all this stuff. And the proof of that is COVID. You know, people on the right were totally against the COVID lockdowns, but all of them obeyed them. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it was sad.
Tells you everything you need to know.
I was surprised.
You know, these are the people that said, you'll never shut down my church. You'll never shut down my church, right? These are the people that said, you'll never take my guns, right? And what happened in COVID? They let them shut down their churches and they let them take their guns. So that's just the reality on the right. We so value social order that we're unwilling to organize against our enemies.
Do you think some of the newer people that are kind of on the right, because I mean, I like to think of myself as a free thinker, not really on the right, but obviously I lean right on a lot of things, at least for nowadays standards.
Yeah.
And I've always been like a rebel, nonconformist California dude, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just interesting because I just don't see conforming as something I think is cool in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And I'd say I'm part of probably the new, what's perceived as right wing right now. And I'm just hoping, I guess, maybe there'll be more people that have a lot more have that mindset, that aren't afraid to, you know, be brave.
Well, I hope so, because
break comfort zones.
And I definitely see it in younger men for sure. This is actually the distinction I make between the right and conservatives. You know, the right wing are willing to organize for power, and conservatives are not willing to do that. All they want to do is engage in conventional electoral politics. That's all they're willing to do. You know, I'll give you an example of that. You know, there is no, you know, I have a lot of friends of mine who are libertarians, and I always point out to them, there's no libertarian path to a libertarian government. You have to seize control of the government by dictatorial control, and then you can implement your principles. Because you're going to have to defeat every single body that doesn't want libertarian government. Yeah. So the paradox here is it takes a collective to defend individual rights. And if you're anti-collective, you'll never win. There's no libertarian path to libertarian state. There's no constitutional path to reestablishing constitutional rule. We have to assume power by whatever means is necessary. And I mean any means necessary, whatever it takes. Even if it's illegal and unconstitutional, we have to use those means to take power. And once we win, then we get our principles. You get your principles after you win, right? The founders, when they fought a war against Britain, didn't use the constitutional principles to beat Britain. They stole all those. Every ship in the U.S. Navy was stolen from the British. Okay, we were ruthless and in ways you can't even imagine that are really not written about in histories of the Revolutionary War. Just how clever and ruthless American fighters were. They didn't use constitutional principles. They established those principles after they won by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And our guys, I'm a Gen X guy, so and I wind up dealing with a lot of boomers in politics. And Gen X were the first ones to rebel against the boomer approach, right? Because we saw that it just completely had destroyed this country. And I still, I just had a breakfast this morning with a bunch of boomers. I have a Thursday breakfast where it's like my insight into normie conservatism, and they still think that playing by normal electoral politics, they're going to get their way. It's just not going to happen.
There's just no compromise when we're talking about mutilating children, sterilizing children, honestly.
Like, I mean, you got an AG named Bonta there in California, right? And Bonta is leading the charge on this child transgender bullshit, right? He even threatened the hospitals that if they followed Trump's executive order, he would jail them, right? So, where are the private investigators that follow him around and catching him with prostitutes and drugs?
Right. I mean, I saw HHS and Bill Asaley and,
that's what they do to us. That's what they do to our guys.
Letters.
Yeah.
Some letters and about the, state championships, having a guy in the girls' sports and.
Our guys don't do stuff like that. Our guys they go vote. But our guys, if you want to make change, you got to take these guys out by whatever mechanisms you have available to you. And believe me, every single one of them is committing felonies every single day. So with the right apparatus, you could get prosecutions against all of them. But our guys won't do it.
Well, I hope to see that change because we need to fight fire with fire. We can't just let them bully us. The left has no problem doing that to people on the right, as you've seen in the last few years.
Yeah.
Unquestionably.
No question.
But, okay. I'm wondering, what are you going to do now? Because your son's how old now? And what are you going to do moving forward?
They just had their 13th birthday on the 7th of May. So they're twins, so they have the same birthday. Yeah. People laugh at me, Harrison, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these procedures illegal in California to protect my sons. And I am going to, one way or another, I've had limited success here, start running recall elections against family court judges. And I'm going to start creating alternative news media for California. That's why I was so happy you started a podcast. We need alternative news media in California. I need a way to aggregate that so that people who, one of the nice things about California is even the liberals in California is they don't trust the power centers. Like they don't trust the media. They don't trust the man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In Texas, where I live, all the normies trust the man. They trust the man. You know what I mean? California's got this one thing going for it that nobody trusts the man, right? So we need to create what the Russians used to call samizdat newspapers. Samizdat means the real story. You get the propaganda from the mainstream news outlets. We need people telling the real story. And I want to do firsthand, people who will do firsthand reporting. People who are literally chased down a judge and say, who was that prostitute you were just with? Or, who was that 16-year-old boy that you were just in the car with? What's going on with that? Like literally doing that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that O'Keefe Media does, needs to be done. That O'Keefe Media is showing us the way of how we can use media to take down people in politics. They've done it. So that kind of thing needs to be done. So there's a legislative approach. I probably am going to put a lot
Ballot
of time and
initiative,
energy.
or
Well, I'm going to put a lot of energy into the wienerectomy out of this California Senate. We got to get rid of him first. He's actually very well funded by Soros and Paul Singer.
well, the problem with him
And
too, besides being crazy in his beliefs, I should say, is he runs the budget committee, so he gets to determine. So
correct.
if anyone wants to go against him, they have to risk getting no funding for their bills and for any of their stuff. So that's the
That's right.
least get him out of that spot.
Yeah, and listen, there's a principle in economics called opportunity costs, right? And and I explained this to my boys. My boys said that they wanted to get Apple Watches, and I said, well, I don't buy things for you. I match you dollar for dollar. So if your Apple Watch costs $500, then you got to make 250 somehow. And
Yeah.
they said, but we're just kids. We don't know how to make money. I said, what? I said, you're a kid. You have a competitive advantage over everybody that's doing work right now. You can underbid anybody. I said, what's your opportunity cost for raking leaves? And opportunity cost is the thing that you would get with your next best opportunity. So what's my kid's next best opportunity? 0. So if they even earn $1 for raking leaves, they're better off than they were, right?
Yeah.
So we just walked around the neighborhood and we would just find all these jobs that people don't like to do. People don't like to pick up dog shit. People don't like to rake their leaves. People don't like to get in the mulch, pull weeds out of their gardens. And my boys will do that for $5 and do a good job, right? So they easily made $250 in a week. Easily. Like it was just not even hard at all because their opportunity costs are so low. Who could underbid them? Nobody can I can't underbid them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Similarly, in politics, the fact that we're not in politics, the fact that we're not running for office means our political opportunity costs are 0, man. Right?
That's true.
We can get that son of a bitch out of office because we don't care about his budget. There's nothing he can do to us on his budget committee. Right?
Right.
And what we need to do, and I did this pretty successfully in Dallas from a rhetorical perspective. I gave several speeches to the log cabin Republicans, here in Texas. And I just told them the truth. I just said, look, either you fix this, because you told us that if we gave you equal rights and we gave you all the respect that we give everybody else and we don't put any impediments in your way, that you would be pro-family and that you would protect children just like we do. And I said, well, now it's time for you to step up. Now we got this transgender issue. And I said, if you don't fix this transgender issue with us, what will happen is we will take away all of your rights. We will make sodomy illegal again. We'll put you in prison for it. Like, that's how people feel about this. So, it's going to affect the gay community if they don't fix it. And I've talked to a lot of gay people in California who agree with me on this.
Every single one I've ever met.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So it seems like we could get a coalition against Senator Weiner.
Yeah.
And at least put him through his paces in the primary, And it may take a few times. Usually the way this works is you run against good candidates against them in the primaries. Like we get a really good gay candidate against him in the primaries, right? And then he has to spend $9 million to win, right? Well, now he's behind the 8 ball in the next election cycle. So he's got to spend $9 million again, but he doesn't have it. Now he's only got 7, but he still wins.
Okay.
Then by the 3rd one, he can only spend $2 million because you drained his treasury, and now you win. Right?
Interesting.
It usually takes 3 cycles, is what I've found. Yeah, and I've done it here in Texas several times. I've done it in South Carolina, did it in Delaware, did it in Alabama. So it usually takes 3 cycles to run them out of money. And because each time you run a good candidate, the big donors are hearing the arguments from the good candidate. I mean, this is a good gay guy running. He's an upstanding guy in the community. We all know him. And listen to what he's saying about this guy. Maybe this isn't the guy I should be donating to. You start peeling off donors and eventually you win the seat, It's going to take thinking like that to win. And unfortunately, our guys are just oriented on stunts, you know, like um, uh, standing with billboards out on the street, you know, having a little protest in front of a clinic. You know, these are all good. I'm all for them. Street organizing is good. I'm for culture hacking. You know, I mean, like what Szabo does. Do that kind of stuff. I'm all for it. But in the end, if you can't replace somebody in office, you don't have any political power. That's what
do you think
political
about
power is.
Right? It totally is. What do you
Yeah.
think though about ballot initiatives then? Because that's the only way I see. I don't think we get all of our
Yeah, you
crazy
guys have
ideas in
that. We didn't
California.
have that in
Yeah, it's a
Texas.
real
You
thing.
should use that. Yeah.
We tried last year and it didn't pass, but I think we could get enough signatures if we did a better job.
Yeah, keep trying.
Strategizing,
And then
organizing,
Bonta each time is going to change the wording and the title and all that. He's going to try to screw you over.
Right.
There are ways for you to use jujitsu and turn that to your advantage, man. But you got to think that it's going to take 2 or 3 electoral cycles to get any results. You just got to accept that and have the money and the time for it. Both,
Yeah.
And you can do it.
Okay.
But if a wienerectomy out of the Senate, that would be a watershed moment for California politics for kids. It would be one of the greatest steps forward protecting kids in California.
It would be incredible to see. I'd like to
Yeah.
help any way I can to make that happen for sure. Okay. You got your kid's 13 years old. We're going to make it illegal in California to protect them. Do you think that at this point, since you're saying as an example, we just talked about usually 3 cycles, so that you basically aren't going to be able to talk to them until they're adults? And it's a horrible thing for me to ask. I don't even like that I asked that, so sorry. It's just a real question.
No, man, it's a real question. I appreciate the realism because I'm a realist. Fundamentally, I'm not an idealist. I'm a realist. And I mean, I'm not going to see my kids till they're 18, and I'm not going to be able to talk to them till they're 18, and they won't trust me or have the real story until they're 30.
You think they'll take that long with everything
Oh,
on
it's how long it took
internet?
me. It's how long it took me. I remember, I've lost my father. It takes that long.
Yeah.
Their whole life is going to be set back 10 to 15 years. That's what they're going to suffer. So I'm focusing right now on just trying to make a lot of money and I'm going to put 100% of my income into trust funds for them to make up for that lost 10 years.
That's good. I know they'll be okay once they 30 or whenever it happens. I know they'll be strong men like you. And I appreciate it. Is there anything you want to say to close this out?
Just want to say I love my sons, James and Jude. If you're listening, one day we'll meet again. But listen, I love you. I'm not away from you by choice. This has been something that's been driven by your mother, not by me. I love you, and my home is always open to you. And when you're able, come visit.
I love that. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Save James.